I acquired a wonderful bit of wisdom this morning. Came on Twitter. Someone had posted a quotation from the estimable Miss Dolly Parton, and here's what she said. The way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain. Now, how well said, Dolly. I love it. And it expresses a concept that I've been trying to work into almost every class I've ever taught, regardless of the subject matter of the class. And that is, we very seldom get something of value without giving up something of value. Every choice that we make is almost certainly going to require us to give up something that we value in order to get something else that we value. Take the simple thing about getting a puppy. Oh, I'd love to have a puppy. But I know that when I get that puppy, I'm going to have to give up at least one night's sleep, and probably a lot more as time goes on. This also tells us a little bit about the important choices that we make, both as individuals and as our culture or as our society. It would be nice if all of the choices that we made were between something good and something bad. Those choices are simple, and no one needs a whole lot of education or wisdom to make them. My dog, for example, is pretty capable of making the choice between the evil of peeing in the house and the good of peeing in the yard. And he makes that choice pretty consistently. And it's not too hard for him, and it takes no more intelligence than a dog to make a choice between something that is good and something that is bad. But we as humans wind up making the more difficult choices, choices that psychologists call approach choices and avoidance choices. See how I'm learning to use my new software. An approach choice is a choice in which the closer we get to one positive, the farther we get from a competing positive. For example, in teaching government classes, I always ask my students if they value individual liberty. And of course they all do. And then I ask if they also value the common good. And we all value that as well. But the difficulty comes when we understand that we buy the common good in terms of individual liberty. When I teach public health classes, we cover the case of Jacobson versus Massachusetts, a classic case of approach, where Mr. Jacobson valued his individual liberty and did not want to get a smallpox shot. But the Supreme Court said the government also has to provide for the common good, and so everyone has to give up their freedom to refuse a smallpox shot in order to protect the public. Now, similar to the approach conflict is the avoidance conflict. And in the avoidance conflict, we find that the farther away we get from something we want to avoid, the closer we get to something else that we also want to avoid. A really homely example of this, and one that is really prevalent around where I live today, is the choice between avoiding potholes and avoiding construction zones. We would like to live in a city that has streets free of potholes. We would also like to drive on the streets that are free from construction zones. But quite obviously, we buy our freedom from potholes in terms of freedom from construction zones. These are avoidance conflicts. So that's our lesson from the day, and it's all inspired by Dolly Parton. And let's just take a look at it again. The way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you've got to put up with the rain. I think you're right, Dolly.